Got it.
Come on in. Stay a while. It's time to get coached up with another edition of the Coach Scott Field Show. You might be watching us on DBTV, which is a national international cable network that's a first of its kind. And I am thrilled to say that we have the opportunity to be seen in 300 million households around the globe thanks to DBTV. You could be seeing us on CSTV or the Rewind Sports 60 network. Thank you for choosing us for your viewership options. I'm eternally grateful. If you're listening to us in podcast form, trust me, Charlie Rosen, the award-winning author, Coach Ray Scott, who has written the book, we are excited to be with you. Had a few technical difficulties, but we got it up and running now. So, coaches, super excited to have you come on and discuss the NBA in black and white. Coach Scott is down at the bottom on my screen, and I got Coach Charlie Rosen directly beside me. So, gentlemen, welcome to another edition of the Coach Scott Field Show. You've been on individually before, but to have this dream team of success with us today is awesome.
Thank you, my friend. I am so glad to be here, and I'll speak up. Number one, because I'm the senior member here. Chaz is a few light years younger than I, but this exploration that we took, we're just so proud to bring before you, Scott, because we know you touch so many homes and so many people's lives, and with our messaging in our book, it's just a dream come true to be able to get it out in front of so many people, because Charlie and I have been fighting a good fight. We're doing everything we can, again, to get this exploration out, let people see not only what our dream is, but what our soul is, because there's so many parts of our soul in this book.
So, well, I'm just glad to be anywhere. And, I also want to say that I want to be just like Ray when I grow up.
Oh, there you go. I like that. And gentlemen, so take us through the process. I mean, Charlie, you have written many wonderful books and award winning and just great pieces of work out there. How did this all come to, I mean, did you guys start talking about it? I mean, how did the collaboration start? So I'll let you speak on that, Charlie. How did this process start for you when you heard about, Coach Scott's vision with this?
He sent me an email out of nowhere 3 years ago, maybe. I still have it posted. It says, where is it? I have it posted here somewhere. It says, I've been a long distance fan of yours, something like that. And that was like out of nowhere.
Wow.
And I don't know how we first connected. I don't remember. Ray, do you remember the first time we spoke or emailed or something? What happened?
We connected off of Facebook because being sportsmen, being guys that are into basketball and baseball and boxing, we were really just having conversation. We were octogenarians or about to be, and we were having conversations. And in at some point, we said, call me. We wanted to discuss it live. And we said, well, so we started talking on the phone. And when we started speaking on the phone, one of the dangers for both of us is that our wives hear our thoughts as we meander.
Read our thoughts.
And my wife Jennifer said, "Now Daya gets in on this. She got her licks in. Charlie's wife got her licks in. They got in our stuff." But we said, "Hey man," Charlie said, "You got stuff here for a book." And so Charlie, being the kind of guy he is, he fired stuff off. So when he fired the emails off, it came back with what I had been told. And what I had been told is that no one has an interest in a book by a guy named Ray Scott. No one, no one knows you. And because you're comparing me to Julius and LeBron and, all the guys of our time. So the people that are doing the publishers, they're not interested in a couple of old guys. So, no kidding, Chaz said, we're going to keep doing this. I had given up. I said, nobody's going to want to hear from a book by me. Chaz said, no, we're going to keep up. And he said, I got a guy. I know a guy I'm going to try. I'm going to try this Dan Simon guy with 7 stories. I know him. He said he's a guy that really has a view not only into the future, but what made the future, the past. And you kind of need that. And a lot of young guys don't have that. They're as you know, Scott, they're futuristic, but looking back, they could care less. And so Charlie tapped that. This is what we bring to the table. We bring historical value to the table from the perspective of the 50s. Actually, we were back in the 30s. When Chaz did the research, he went all the way back to the Harlem Globetrotters of the 30s.
Wow.
A chapter there and a chapter on Earl Lloyd, which was the 40s. And Dan Simon said, sorry, guys, that's not what I want. What I want is the 60s. I want John Fitzgerald Kennedy, which you guys talked about. I want Ray, you going into the NBA. And there was only one correlation that Charlie made. He said, yeah, but we've got to look at the motivation, because a kid doesn't turn 22 and his life begins. Something has formulated in his mind how he's going to get to become an NBA draft pick. And so Dan said, okay, he allowed us that. And so when we started getting into the book and the meat, we did it from a historical perspective. And I mean, we dug deep. And I enjoyed it because that's a strength of mine. Charlie enjoyed it because it's a strength of his. And so, we didn't want to do a narrative of a tale.
Yeah.
We wanted to paint a picture of a league and a country and how those two areas grew in our lifetime. The first 20 years we picked was we call it the 60s, from 1960 until 1980. And that's why I call it an exploration.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, the book is called The NBA in Black and White, written by our guest here today, Coach Ray Scott and Coach Charlie Rosen. I mean, you've even got an introduction by Earl the Pearl Monroe. But let's tell the viewers and the listeners of the show, where can they get a copy of this book? Because I'm so glad and I'm thrilled and honored that I got to read through this, and it took me through a journey and put me in that time. And I've just really enjoyed it. So I want everybody to go out and get a copy.
Thank you. Chaz?
Well, most bookstores have it. One bookstore sold out. What was it? Walmart sold out.
They were just about out.
Wow.
I guess that they weren't going to the warehouse any longer. Barnes and Noble, they have so far, I think, reached out and said they are having sales. The big sales, of course, are Amazon.
Amazon, that's
Amazon, you can literally get it overnight. If you order today by 6 o'clock, it'll be on your desk tomorrow. That's how great Amazon has been with it. But they did come out with a caveat that you can order it at any bookstore, your favorite bookstore. You walk in, tell them you want the NBA in black and white, and 7 Stories Publishing will have it right to you.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Let me say one more thing about Dan Simon. He's a friend. He's published 7 or 8 of my books. He was at my last wedding. That's another story. And the three of us, he had a conversation with Ray and myself, and that beside the perspective that we sent him. I think it was a conversation. He knew me.
Yes.
He knew me for years. But talking to Ray, he said, "This guy is for real, and this guy has a story to tell that is meaningful. It's not just the ball went in and we won, the ball didn't go in and we lost. It's about Ray's experience throughout his lifetime dealing with the racial situation. And it's even, he was at the top of the game. He was an NBA player, so it's kind of the view from the top. That was one of the titles we were kind of give. Ray 6'9", I was 6'8". The view from the top about how racism even affects NBA players. Several years ago, LeBron has his home out in California, and somebody painted the N-word on one of his gates. So yes, we see the how dangerous it is for Black kids in the streets, and but it's even NBA players and college players and suffer from racism, and so a lot of the book is about racism. But again, it's the book is meant to inform, but it's also meant to inspire.
Yeah.
And it's one of the themes is despite all the good, bad things that happen to the NBA, in many respects, the NBA has been and is ahead of the rest of the country as far as dealing with the racial issue. Because, for example, half of the coaches in the NBA are African Americans, which is very, very meaningful. When Ray came into the league, he was the first Black man to be named Coach of the Year in 1974.
Yep.
There were just, Black players were role players, except for Oscar, Wilt, Elgin, Bill Russell. Most of the other guys had to kind of subsume their game and play and be role players. So Ray tells that story about how he approached the NBA and how he evolved as a player and what he saw. Black players rebound, play defense in the early years when Ray came into the league, and the white guys, except for, Oscar and those guys, and the white guys did all the scoring. So Ray's story is about many things. I've written, it's the 27th book I've written, and
Wow.
I think it is absolutely the most meaningful book that I have ever been involved with. Ray's honesty, his passion, his eloquence, his perception, understanding of more than just his life. I did this, I did.
Charlie froze up there on us, Coach.
Froze. But that's and I'll just put an appendage on that. The thing that I wanted to get across, Scott, and you know this as yourself a historian. I've heard you do discussions on your shows, and so you too are one of those people. You not only look forward, but you look at how you got there.
That's right.
And people call that looking back, and that's true. How are you going to know where you're going if you don't know where you've been? And I thought it was important that we and Charlie did a great job with, again, we just research, and we were partners, but we brought out the Earl Lloyd, who was the first guy to ever play in the NBA. Not
Yeah.
Willie, Chamberlain, not Bill Russell, not Oscar Robertson, not Elgin Baylor, but three guys: Sweetwater Clifton, Earl Lloyd, and Chuck Cooper, an All-American from Duquesne of all schools, that at one time fielded a team of 4 African Americans and one great Jewish kid who I remember named Mickey Winograd. But at that time they had Ricketts and what's the other kid? Cy Hugo Green and Dr. Fletcher Johnson, who became a heart surgeon, and the great Jim Tucker. That was the view I had of that basketball world, and it wasn't a world that looked like, well, I'm just going to be in that world. I'm going to join that world. It was not that way. It was not so. So, you know, if people research basketball and where it was, yes, you could play the game, but you weren't welcome, because if we had you relegated to inferiority as a person, then it just stands to reason. As in sports, we're going to relegate you to inferiority. And the NBA did that, but they only did it for 3 years.
Right.
And in 19, they decided to make that change and say, we're going to bring these 3 guys into the NBA. And so you began to see African Americans. Think about that, Coach, how you see 3 African Americans on a floor of 80 to 90 people.
Right.
What they call a league. And all of a sudden, these guys performed that they were going like, well, there's a guy named Bill Russell in San Francisco, and there's a guy named Oscar Robertson in Cincinnati, and there's a guy named Elgin Baylor in Seattle. You know, you start seeing these guys, and then you bring in Wilt Chamberlain from Kansas. It's the league takes a bigger role because now you get and attract the spectators to see African American players. And that was the launch of the NBA.
Yep.
And launch lasted, I would say, for about 30 years until we got up to Magic and Larry Bird.
That's right. Because games weren't even broadcast live until they came into the league. And people don't realize that.
That's the first thing basketball fans know, because everybody recognizes how we used to go home and wait for the tape delay.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And Coach, I even remember that, I wanted to say Houston Rockets were playing, and that's when the O.J. Simpson chase started. That was even tape delayed. And so that game wasn't even played live until shortly thereafter. And so how the league evolved and the trials and tribulations like you faced, I think are phenomenal, because think about it. You could be traveling with your team and you may have to stay in a different hotel because of the segregation. And you could only eat at certain restaurants. And that's the awareness that I think people need to know, that, you know, we've come a long way, but we can't repeat the same mistakes that have been made in the past. So when you think of social injustice and stuff, that's why I think this is beautifully done, because you take the readers on a journey through what it was like in that era. And it's fascinating.
And see, for me, I was so proud, because remember, now we're involved in civil rights, we're involved in voting rights, and we're involved in the Vietnam War, a war we considered unjust. So right. I'm 22 years old, growing up in front of all of America with the trials and tribulations of what America presents and represents. So because of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, who said, we are going to have new frontiers. We're going to welcome our brothers and sisters. Our Negro brothers and sisters are going to be included. We want them included in the future of America. Now, physically, he didn't do it. And I have to say that. He never put the pen to paper, but his successor, because he was unfortunately assassinated, and that was happening throughout the 60s. But John Fitzgerald Kennedy's home lived through Lyndon Baines Johnson. He made those things happen, and up to and including the Vietnam War. So this is in the 60s, that tumultuous time. It's funny, we call it the 60s, but as you know, usually a decade with a movement like the Roaring 20s, they last like 20 years. So we actually lasted from 1960 with John Fitzgerald Kennedy until Ronald Reagan came into office, which was in 1980. So we try to paint that story in the book, but in doing so, and what I always want to say, and I never, ever, ever, because I think individual players did individually great things, but there were people that stood out. And a couple of them I want to name here, Scott.
Please.
Bill Russell, the activist, the man. And I remember people saying, oh, we don't know Russell was well liked. And I said, well, what is it about him you didn't like? Think of where he was at the time, not eating in restaurants, not allowed in hotels. What is it you wanted to like about him? Think of where he was at the time, not eating in restaurants, not allowed in hotels.
I think Coach Rosen got in there. We got a little echo going, Coach. Can you hear us, Charlie?
I can hear. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can't see you because your camera's off, but Ray is, talking about Bill Russell and that time.
I can hear you guys. Can you hear me?
Can't see you because your camera's off.
How can my camera be off?
Little technical difficulty there for our viewers, but Coach Ray, continue your story there with Bill Russell because
because those four guys were near and dear to my heart because they built the league in different ways.
Bill Russell.
Wilt his flamboyance and excellence.
Near and dear to my
heart. Being together a team of the eight. Flamboyance and excellence. Oscar Robertson built the union, the association. And I always say the players of today that get those $1 million contracts, they need to send him flowers.
I was on and
You
I
know, say the players of today that
Oscar.
$1 million contract, took the bullet for indulging with his dignity and his eloquence on the court.
Click.
Those men were very much in charge of putting and we talk about LeBron and Julius and Connie Hawkins, and they're great players. But Elgin Baylor was the first basketball player, in my opinion, that brought flamboyance to the NBA. Now, then we had the Earl Monroes and the Clydes and the Willises and the Cowens, but in the beginning, because remember, we were not a television sport. We had to capture fans through the newspapers and through spectatorship. And boy, did they have the guys that built that model. So I want to make sure that on your show, Coach, that we're gracious and make sure that as we do in the book, we mention those guys that came from HBCU schools that supposedly couldn't play. And we will criticize St. Louis because we couldn't eat in restaurants in St. Louis. But I will have to say this, Marty Blake was such a great scout for St. Louis that at one time in the 60s, there were 6 African Americans on the St. Louis Hawks basketball team.
Wow.
And I get challenges everywhere, and I say, well, I'll give them to you. There's Bill Bridges, Elmo Beatty, Paul Silas, John Barnhill, and a kid out of Fred LaCour out of San Francisco. They had 6 African Americans on a team that was noted in an area of segregation. So that's how that thinking worked in the NBA. And I think it got to the table. And when it gets to the table, the goal, you say, Scott, a coach, if you said, what's your goal? Our goal is to bring people to the table with open hands. That's what I want on my epitaph, an open hand.
I like that.
To the table.
Yeah. Amen, Coach. I like that. And as you're sharing your wisdom and sharing the knowledge of some excerpts that are in the book, it triggers thoughts in my mind And why were people so uncomfortable with Bill Russell? May he rest in peace, who we just lost a few weeks ago. I think it made them uncomfortable because they had to change their lens and change their perspective and change the way they thought about the African American community. That in their minds as Caucasians, everything was fine, everybody had their place, and they wanted it to stay the same. But Bill was asking questions and bringing thoughts to the table to make Caucasian America change the way they viewed, because a lot of people didn't know that he couldn't go into restaurants, or if they knew it, they turned a blind eye to it because they thought that's just the way it should be. And that wasn't right. So for the social activism part of it, I admire that. And I think it needs to be talked about and discussed even more. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh, no doubt. And I think, and I was never so much in admiration of my sport than I was when the gentleman was unduly murdered in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And the NBA and the WNBA stepped to the forefront of that feeling, of that citing, and that crying for justice.
Yeah.
And I was never more proud of my league that I grew up in. And I
Right.
was, guys, they're getting it.
Yeah.
And
And what we're talking about, Coach, is George Floyd being murdered by the police there in Minnesota. So I just wanted to, make sure that everybody knew that's what the discussion was about right here.
you nailed it, Coach. And but I want people to remember what those kids did.
Yeah.
Because it was during a pandemic. So we're all locked. The guys are locked up playing in a bubble. How many players said, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to participate. Well, that didn't happen.
Yeah.
The players were all in. The unity they showed, the excellence of basketball that they showed, the feelings that they showed for their fellow men and women. And they coined a phrase that people took completely out of context. And the phrase was Black Lives Matter. It wasn't, we're saying Black Lives Matter for supremacy. We're saying Black Lives Matter because that's what we feel should exist in a system that says loudly through some of the things that were occurring that those lives did not matter.
Yeah. Well, Coach, that's well articulated. And I think credit also needs to go to Chris Paul, who was the president of the Players Union at that time, and then also Adam Silver, allowing the players to utilize the platform to showcase their concerns. So let's give those guys credit as well, because they had to lead the charge as well to bring awareness and make more people feel uncomfortable. But yet it was a step that needed to be done to have better situations. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Or crisis management. And it was well done with Doc Rivers, Coach Popovich, LeBron James. We dedicate the book, and I want people to understand this. We dedicate the book in the beginning to LeBron James, not for his basketball. And Coach and I were, Rosen and I were very careful to articulate that. LeBron James is being honored by this book because of what he does in his community.
Amen.
Or as an encouragement. And we are not going to disparage that gentleman, because that is such, I have kids, you have kids. Think of the happiness on your kids' faces when you do something positive for them. Well, I think of those over thousands of kids that LeBron James has put smiles on their faces with college education.
That's right. Provide hope, provide opportunity. Again, it's not discussed enough, but he's providing knowledge, and that's power. And when he's able to go back to his communities and give to his communities like that, that's wonderful. Because Coach Scott, I don't know if you know, but my adopted son, is African American. So of course, I want things, and I want the world to be a better place for him, but not only for him and his generation, but for future generations, so that his grandkids can grow up in a world and grow up in a society that's going to be better.
And you're giving him back happiness that he provides for you. I couldn't imagine the smiles that kid puts on your face.
I'm so proud. And it's not about me and him. I mean, he is leaving next week to go to Finland to play professional basketball, and we're so proud of him. I'm glad to see Coach Rosen is able to get back in the conversation, but so eloquently put, Coach Scott, how you share this knowledge and wisdom and your personal experiences, through this book, The NBA in Black and White. And Coach Rosen, can you hear us?
Yes, I'm getting an echo, but I can hear you.
Welcome back. Coach Scott has shared some wonderful information. And let me ask you this, Coach Charlie. What was it that was drawing you to want to be a part of this project, to share Coach Scott's story? You skimmed on it, but what really excited you to be like, hey, we're going to make this and manifest it and make it happen?
Because what really excited you? I'm getting an echo from you, because as I say, it was not just about Ray's life. It was about racism, institutionalized racism in the country, and how to deal with it, how to fight it, how to try and improve it, and what does it mean? One of the most meaningful sentences, I think, in the whole book. And Ray is married to a wonderful, beautiful white woman named Jennifer. And he said that when the two of them are together, that's the only time Jennifer is a white woman.
Wow.
Which I think it says so much about their culture. It just says enormous. Ray is always a black man. He's always a black man. But Jennifer is only a white woman, is seen as a white woman. But there's another point where Ray and Jennifer were having lunch, and some couple was watching them and came over and said, "You two are so obviously in love. It just brings such joy to us, just watching the two of you." And things like that. I mean, I was just drawn in to the whole heartwarming blessings, love of the whole thing. We dealt with each other just over the phone, and we developed this relationship where we said goodbye. I love you, brother. That's Ray is the kind of guy who has hundreds of best friends. That's the kind of guy he is, and it is an honor to be considered one of them. So, and he was so open, he held nothing back, and we just trusted each other, and the whole thing just came together. And everybody who has read it and has contacted me and has contacted Ray says that they love it. So, I mean, there it is. It was meaningful, but it was a product of love and an exhibition of love, of all the love in Ray's life that has influenced him, his mother and his family and his wife and my wife, who did some copy editing. So it was a team.
Oh,
It was a team project, and that was just it's amazing. It's just amazing experience for me.
And see, I think that's wonderful. And again, ladies and gentlemen, we got Charlie Rosen and Ray Scott, the authors of the NBA in Black and White. And I've got to interject because when I'm sitting here and I read this book, a few weeks ago, it moved me and it taught me because I do love history and I do love to get a feel and a connection to that generation because I wasn't born until 1967. So to be able to go on this roller coaster ride through civil rights and social injustice the way that you've experienced it through your lens, Coach Scott, I feel that this book, it could be a movement and a powerful movement because of the message is so heartfelt and it's very authentic. And it's a credit to you guys that were able to pull that from each other to put it in a form that is now going to be a legacy for you. And I just wanted to say that because I don't know if we can give it enough credit and the due credit that this book deserves. So I implore people to go out and get this book at their bookstores or Amazon to go through those feelings that were going on in that generation. And I want people to be a part of that movement and feel the authenticity in these words, in this literature.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Coach Scott, is there a part? I mean, you brushed on some of it, but was there a part that you couldn't wait to share because you just wanted people to know, the reality of that generation? Was there a part that you're like, Charlie, we got to get this in?
And we did. We worked very hard. And when I say this, Chaz will smile. What we worked on really, really hard was how Jennifer and I met.
Oh, yes.
Because I went to Eastern Michigan basketball, and I meet this lady. But as I go to coach basketball, the three of us are all competitors. That our lives are built on. When you put the title coach on us, it means something. It's like being a priest. It means something. Our lives are built on leadership and the love and that we bring to people's lives. So I go to Eastern Michigan to try to bring that there. And so you would think when you walk away, you go, Ray, what were your wins and losses at Eastern Michigan? And Charlie knows my greatest win at Eastern Michigan is my wife's job. And it's in there. I mean, I was outdone. That I said, if you think you have a plan, and then there's the Lord's plan. And I'm walking away with this beautiful wife. We're together over 40 years, 3 wonderful daughters. And I'm going like, I didn't even dream that walking up to Eastern Michigan, going up the stairs to the gymnasium. And then I meet this lady and I'm going like, who is this? Who is this lady? What? And I'm city. I'm from South Philly, 3rd floor walk up in South Philly. And my wife is from a 400-acre farm. Can you get more different people in life? And Charlie and I we have a saying, 3rd time is a charm. Right, Jazz? And that's something that we believe in because, as I said, there's your plan and there's God's plan. And I'll tell you, I got the best of that plan because I've been with Jennifer. There's your plan and there's God's plan. Ask me, are you happy? It's a simplistic question, very simple. Are you? And I remember, well, I'm content. I'm in the NBA, so things are pretty good. But are you happy? And if you ask me that in the relationship, about the relationship that I've been in for the last 40 years, if you ever said to me, Ray, are you happy? Resoundingly, yes. I learned how to take orders.
I think that's beautifully said. I wanted, Coach, you're on mute there, Coach Rosen. because I know there's a little bit of echo and feedback with technical difficulties, but was there a part when you're talking with Ray and you're like, Coach Ray, we've got to get this in the book also? Oh, I think, there you go. Go ahead, Coach.
And you're like, Coach Ray, we've got to get this in the book also.
Well, I think one of the aspects of Ray's story is that it's unusual. He wasn't like this, super duper college All-American. He was the first player drafted in the first round, the fourth pick in the first round from the Eastern League. So he started on the ground floor, really. He learned how to play ball. He learned how to play the pro game in the Eastern League. And he talks a lot about the Eastern League, which is something that people don't really understand. But that gave him a little bit of a head start when he got into the NBA, because he did have an idea about, things were kind of disorganized in the Eastern League. You didn't have practices, and you didn't have, offense number one, offense number two. You just learned how to play with each other. But he understood the physicality, what you needed to play at that level. Of course, the NBA was a step up. So that is part of his background that's just so unusual. And that's part of the whole thing. Everything about him is unusual. His perception is unusual. His eloquence is unusual. The feeling, the heartfelt feeling that he has. And he didn't say anything negative about anybody. It's a positive recitation. It's all positive. There's no way, there's no turn. Things are presented and the readers have to think. I think that's the main point of the whole book. The readers have to think about what they're reading, and it prods them and it gives them a whole other things to think about. So the reader is kind of a participant in the book. It's not the kind of book where you read it and you say, oh, it's a good book. What's next on my list? It penetrates deeply. If you're open to it, it penetrates deeply into your consciousness, and it should make a difference in people's lives. It made a difference in our life, and the people who have gotten back to me have said the same thing. It makes a difference.
Wow. I think that is well said. Coach Scott, you've got to be so proud of the book. Was there a part that you wish you could have got in that you couldn't, or that maybe didn't make it past an edit, but you're like, boy, that's still meaningful to me?
Mhm.
That you wish you could have got in that
What's
you
our
couldn't,
goal?
or that maybe didn't make it past an edit?
Our readers to think. And as Charlie said, we were not writing a narrative to be conclusive. We were writing a narrative that we wanted to present, whereby your mind could tell you how one would live in the 60s and 70s. We wanted your parallel thoughts. And because I didn't live in the roaring 20s and the 30s, but I certainly paralleled myself how I would have gotten along and existed in that time when Grant and Rice brought a sports page to bear with Jack Dempsey, Babe Ruth, the Four Horsemen, and the galloping ghost, Red Grange. That's how he started writing about sports. And that was the eloquence of his time. I wanted that same parallel for Charlie and I, where we were speaking to the level of sports going from 1947, the beginning of the NBA, until today, hopefully holding out and maybe doing another book, but really looking at that growth, at those instances, at those uninspirational moments and at those inspirational moments, but looking at how people in a basketball league problem solved. The NBA problem solved so greatly, in my opinion, because I was one of three coaches: Lenny Wilkins, Al Attles, and Ray Scott. That was it. That I can look at a league today as an African-American coach and male and say 50% of the coaches in the league that I worked in are African-Americans. I'd like to think that there's a contribution by the people that I grew up with in that league that made that happen. And many, many people should feel good about that and good about themselves.
See, and I'm glad you talked about that, because think about how much further along and how much more evolved and progressive the NBA is over the Shield in the NFL, or even the NBA or the Major League Baseball. So for that, I think there should resonate some pride, because I see it and I'm glad for those opportunities. And even females and female African American females who are on staffs now, which I think is wonderful, because I think, again, it shows the progression in how we've evolved as a society. But let's be honest, we still got a long way to go.
But that's what's going to make our country great and make this country be what it wants to be and what it is designed to be. That we would be a country of equality. And like Bill Russell, he's still waiting for that. It's in our book. It's right in that book. Bill Russell said, I'm still waiting that all men are created equal. And when we get there, and if we keep moving, we can move it. We can move that boulder up the hill, but we can move it easier if we all do it.
That's right. Yeah, that's a great statement. That's a great statement. I'm gonna get Coach Charlie in here. He's on mute. Coach Rosen, can your mute button there, my friend? That's okay. We got a few technical things here. Coach Rosen's going to get that mute button turned off, so there'll be a little bit of echo, but we'll get through it. Oh, we're still on mute. This is live TV, ladies and gentlemen. Stuff like this happens. Oh, you're still on mute, Coach. Well, Coach Scott, I'll let you come back on while he's figuring out that mute button. Share some more eloquence, with our viewers and listeners today, because I love the things that you're touching on. And again, people can go out and get this book. The NBA in black and white. We've got about 5-6 minutes left here. Now, are there other thoughts that you want to share with the viewers? To let them know about, who you are and the motivation behind it, because all the things we've shared today have been just beautiful.
Well, thank you. I do think, and what I'd like to share, Coach, is that the introspective that you get from playing professional basketball, because through playing professional basketball, and this is a question I'm asked all the time: how did you get to meet Muhammad Ali? How did you meet Aretha Franklin? How did you get to meet the Four Tops and the Temptations? Remember, with all of the music that came out in the 60s, if you recall, it evolved from kind of this pop music, and then we went to folk music, and then came Motown.
Barry Gordy, baby.
And he hit the mother lode. I was in Detroit, and I walked around among talent like you walk around in your mall. There's Marvin Gaye. Oh, hi, Marvin. There's Aretha Franklin. Wow. I met her at a club in Indianapolis. I was 22. She was 19. There was one empty stool in this bar that she was taking a break on. Indianapolis, Indiana, Detroit Piston, First time out of the box, I'm on the road and I'm sitting in a bar, and this lady comes up and sits next to me. And she says, "Hi, I'm Aretha Franklin." And I met her right there, and we talked like old friends because we were both representing Detroit.
RESPECT, baby.
In 1966, I was traded. And I was traded to the Baltimore Bullets, going to another franchise and want to be with Earl Pearl and Gus Johnson and Jack Barron and Kevin Lockery. But meanwhile, here I am the night before I leave with Dave Bing and Eddie Miles. They've taken me to a club to see the great Aretha Franklin because they knew she was a favorite of mine.
Wow.
And he said from the stage that night, Scott, from the stage, he said, "I want to dedicate a song to my friend Ray Scott." And the name of the song is "You're Gonna Hear From Me." Guess what? In 1974, I was brought back as an assistant, became a head coach, and there I was in 1974, standing in the middle of Cobo Hall before 11,000 fans, getting the Coach of the Year trophy. Now tell me Aretha Franklin didn't play some seminal role in making that prediction. In "You're Gonna Hear From Me." I'm so proud of that. And
Oh,
Ali, when we say Muhammad Ali, we all just smile. But the man was, but the greatest humanity I've ever seen in a celebrity is in that man. I watched him come to my hometown, Ypsilanti, Michigan, call me up and have me come to a barbershop and watch him greet the public, primarily little kids, girls and boys. And he hugged the little girls and he shadow boxed with the little boys. And as he gave him his autograph with a line that was outside of the barbershop into the street. And I sat there and I looked at that man and I said, what great humanity. I've always loved his humanity. Now, great, highly skilled, celebrated fighter, but I try to look at people and see the humanity in them.
Yep.
That man had an incredibly great humanity.
Oh, I love that. Coach Rosen, in about
Yes.
1 minute, any last words before
Yes.
we have to sign off? Because again, I
Two
want to give you
things.
yes.
Two things. I coached in the CBA for 9 years. I was Phil Jackson's assistant for 3 years, then a head coach for 6 years. I'd say 90% of my players were Black players. And we lived with each other for 5 months or whatever. But I really didn't understand what it meant to be a Black man in America until I did this book with Ray.
Wow.
And one other thing, at the very beginning of Earl Monroe's introduction, he says, "I've never done this before. I've never done an introduction of a book before, but this is important and I have to do this."
Man, I love that. Ladies and gentlemen, Coach Ray Scott, Coach Charlie Rosen, the NBA in black and white. Please go out and get it. And as I close this show, I got to say, please like and follow the Coach Scott Field Show on Facebook. Smash the subscribe button on our YouTube channel. Let's share this content. Let's let it, gain wings, and let's let it touch so many lives, because this is a movement and you guys have done a wonderful job. I'm thrilled and honored to have you both as guests on the show so we can market and promote what I feel is a masterpiece. And it's a shame if people don't go out and get this book for their library. God bless you both. Thank you so much for your time and for your servant leadership and for this collaboration, because it truly is a Michelangelo of literature.
Wow, thank you.
Thank you.